Emily Morrison smoothed down her navy pencil skirt as she stood outside the towering glass building that housed Pierce Industries. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from nervousness about the job, but from something she couldn't quite name. At 24, she had worked hard to get this position as executive assistant to one of the most powerful men in New York. Jackson Pierce was a legend in the business world, self-made billionaire who had built his empire from nothing. She had researched him extensively, seen his photos in magazines, but nothing prepared her for the reality of walking into his office that first Monday morning. The elevator ride to the 45th floor felt both endless and too short. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world of polished marble and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city. The receptionist, a kind woman named Susan, greeted her warmly and showed her to her desk, positioned strategically right outside the CEO's office. That's when she saw him. Jackson Pierce emerged from his office, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was styled with casual precision, and his jawline could have been carved from stone. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. They were a striking shade of gray-blue, intense and penetrating, and when they landed on her, she felt as if he could see straight through to her soul. Miss Morrison. His voice was deep, resonant, and sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. He extended his hand, and when she placed hers in his, the contact was electric. His palm was warm and strong, and for a moment that lasted too long, neither of them moved. Emily saw something flash in his eyes, surprise maybe, or recognition of the same inexplicable pull she felt. "Mr. Pierce." She managed to keep her voice steady as she withdrew her hand. "It's an honor to work for you." His expression remained neutral, professional, but she noticed the slight tension in his jaw. "I expect excellence, Miss Morrison. I don't tolerate mistakes or mediocrity. You won't find either from me, sir?" Something flickered across his face, but he simply nodded and returned to his office, leaving Emily standing there with her heart racing and her palms slightly damp. She had promised herself long ago that she would save herself for someone special, someone who would truly value her. She had turned down advances from college boyfriends and casual dates, waiting for that one person who would make her heart sing. What she hadn't expected was to feel this overwhelming attraction to her boss, a man who was completely off limits. The first 3 months working for Jackson were torture of the sweetest kind. Every interaction was charged with an electricity that neither acknowledged but both felt. Sometimes she would catch him staring at her when he thought she wasn't looking, his expression unguarded and filled with a longing that matched her own. Other times their hands would brush as she handed him documents, and the contact would linger just a second too long, sending heat rushing through her body. But Jackson maintained strict professional boundaries. He never crossed the line, never said anything inappropriate, even though Emily could feel the restraint it took. She learned that he had a policy against workplace relationships, an ironclad rule he had never broken. She also heard whispers around the office about his family pressuring him to settle down, to make a strategic match with someone from their social circle. One Friday afternoon in late October, Emily's best friend Rachel burst into their shared apartment with excitement radiating from every pore. "You need to come with me tonight," Rachel announced, dropping shopping bags on their couch. "Remember, Thomas Reed from my marketing firm. His company is hosting a huge charity gala, and it's masquerade-themed. Everyone who's anyone will be there." Emily shook her head, curling deeper into the couch with her book. "I'm not into those fancy events, Rachel. Which is exactly why you need to go. When was the last time you did something fun? Something spontaneous? Work yourself to death for that demanding boss of yours?" Rachel pulled out a stunning emerald green gown from one of the bags. "I already bought your dress. And before you protest, yes, I used my own money. Consider it an early birthday present." The dress was breathtaking, with a fitted bodice and a flowing skirt that would make Emily feel like a princess. More importantly, Rachel had also procured an elaborate mask decorated with peacock feathers that would conceal most of her face. The idea of being anonymous for one night, Being someone other than the serious, responsible Emily Morrison held an unexpected appeal. Fine, Emily relented with a smile. But if this turns out to be boring, you owe me a weekend of my choice of activities. Deal. Trust me, you won't regret this. If only Emily had known how prophetic those words would be. The gala was held at one of Manhattan's most exclusive hotels, in a ballroom that looked like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing lights across the crowd of elegantly dressed people, all wearing elaborate masks that concealed their identities. Soft music filled the air, and waiters moved smoothly through the crowd with champagne and d'oeuvres. Emily felt transformed in her emerald gown and peacock mask. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to relax, to simply be present in the moment without worrying about work or responsibilities. Rachel had been pulled away by Thomas almost immediately, leaving Emily to wander through the crowd, observing the spectacle of New York's elite at play. That's when she felt it. That same electric pull she felt every day at work, but magnified 1,000 times. She turned slowly, following the invisible thread that seemed to connect her to someone across the room, and her eyes locked with a man standing near the bar. He was tall and powerfully built, wearing a black tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. His mask was simple but elegant, black leather that covered the upper half of his face, leaving visible a strong jaw and lips that curved into a slight smile as he looked at her. Their eyes held across the distance, and Emily felt the world around them fade into insignificance. She couldn't see his full face, had no idea who he was, but something deep inside her recognized him on a fundamental level. It was as if her soul knew his, even though her mind didn't. He moved toward her with purpose, cutting through the crowd with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. Emily's heart pounded as he approached, each step bringing him closer until he stood before her. So near she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Dance with me? It wasn't a question, but a request that sounded more like a plea. His voice was slightly muffled by the mask, but sent shivers through her nonetheless. Emily placed her hand in his, without hesitation, without thought, guided purely by instinct. He led her to the dance floor and pulled her into his arms, one hand settling on her waist, while the other held hers gently but firmly. They moved together as if they had danced 1,000 times before, their bodies in perfect synchronization. "I don't even know your name," Emily whispered, looking up into eyes she couldn't quite make out behind the mask. "Tonight we don't need names. Tonight we can just be." His thumb traced small circles on her waist, and she felt the touch through the fabric of her dress like a brand. They danced for what felt like hours, neither wanting to break the spell. Between dances, they found a quiet corner and talked, carefully avoiding personal details that might reveal their identities. He told her about his love for architecture, about how he found beauty in the way buildings reached toward the sky. She shared her passion for literature, how stories had been her escape growing up in a small town with a single mother who worked 3 jobs. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," he said softly, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw above the mask. "I feel like I've been searching for you without knowing it." Emily's breath hitched. She had saved herself for years, waiting for someone who would make her feel exactly this way. Cherished, seen, understood. "I feel it too," she admitted, like this was meant to happen. When he suggested they leave, find somewhere private to talk more, Emily knew what she was agreeing to. She knew where this would lead, and for the first time in her life, she didn't want to hold back. This felt right in a way nothing else ever had. They took his car to a penthouse apartment with stunning views of the city. The moment the door closed behind them, he turned to her, his hands cupping her face gently. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with desire, but also with concern. "I don't want you to regret this. I've never been more sure of anything." And she meant it. When he kissed her, soft and reverent at first, then deeper and more demanding, Emily felt like she was finally home. She gave herself to him completely. That night, Annie worshipped her body with a tenderness and passion that brought tears to her eyes. It was everything she had dreamed her first time would be. It was perfect and beautiful and overwhelming. They fell asleep tangled together, and Emily drifted off feeling happier than she had ever been. But when dawn broke and sunlight streamed through the windows, reality crashed down with devastating force. She woke first, and in the soft morning light, she could finally see his face clearly without the mask. Her heart stopped, then started again with painful thuds that hurt her chest. No, it couldn't be. But it was. Jackson Pierce. The man she had been fighting her attraction to for 3 months. The man she worked for every single day. As if sensing her shock, Jackson stirred and opened his eyes. She watched the same realization hit him, watched his expression transform from sleepy contentment to stunned disbelief. Emily. His voice was hoarse, disbelieving. She scrambled out of bed, clutching the sheet to her chest, her mind reeling. Oh my God. Oh my God, wait! Jackson sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Just wait. Let me think. But Emily was already gathering her clothes, her hands shaking so badly she could barely dress herself. She had just given her virginity to her boss, the man who had strict rules about workplace relationships, the man whose professional respect she needed. This was a disaster. Emily, please. Jackson had pulled on his pants and was coming toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. This can't happen again. This was a mistake. We were both wearing masks. We didn't know. We can just forget it ever happened. Something like pain flashed across his face. Forget? How am I supposed to forget the most incredible night of my life? His words made her heart crack, but she forced herself to stay strong. We have to. I'll see you at work on Monday, Mr. Pierce. She grabbed her purse and practically ran for the door, needing to escape before the tears threatening to fall could betray her. Emily made it to the elevator before the sobs overtook her, and she cried all the way home, knowing that everything had changed and nothing would ever be the same again. Monday. Morning arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train. Emily stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes trying to decide what armor to wear for facing Jackson Pierce. She finally settled on a conservative gray suit with a high-necked blouse, as if the extra fabric could somehow protect her from the memories of his hands on her skin, his lips trailing fire across her body. The office felt different now, charged with a tension that made every breath difficult. Emily arrived early, hoping to settle in before Jackson appeared, but he was already there. She could see him through the glass walls of his office, standing at his window with his back to the door, shoulders rigid with tension. Their eyes met the moment she sat down at her desk. The connection was instant and electric, just as it had been at the gala, but now it was laced with knowledge and regret. Jackson's expression was unreadable, but Emily saw the tightness around his mouth. The way his hands clenched at his sides. He pressed the intercom button. "Miss Morrison, my office, please." Emily's legs trembled as she walked the short distance. Inside his office, with the door closed, the air felt too thick to breathe. Jackson stood behind his desk, not moving to sit, maintaining the physical distance between them, even as everything in his posture screamed that he wanted to close it. "We need to establish ground rules," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "What happened Saturday night cannot happen again. My policy against workplace relationships exists for good reasons." "I agree completely, Mr. Pierce." Emily kept her voice steady, even as her heart shattered. It was a one-time mistake. "We can both be professional about this." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain or anger, she couldn't tell. "It wasn't a mistake," he said quietly, "but it can't continue. There are things you don't know, complications that make this impossible." Before Emily could ask what he meant, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his jaw tightened. "I need to take this. We'll speak later." Emily fled back to her desk, her mind spinning. What complications? But she didn't have to wonder long. By Wednesday, the answer arrived in the form of a company-wide announcement. Jackson Pierce was engaged to Diana Ashford, daughter of Richard Ashford, one of the most powerful businessmen on the East Coast. The engagement had been in negotiation for months. A strategic alliance between two business empires. Emily read the announcement 3 times, each word feeling like a knife to her heart. He had known. That night at the gala, when he had held her and made love to her with such tenderness, He had already been in negotiations to marry someone else. She felt sick, betrayed, even though logically she knew he hadn't known who she was either. But he had known afterward, and he hadn't told her. The next 2 weeks were torture. Jackson was distant and cold, speaking to her only when necessary and always with rigid formality. Emily threw herself into her work, staying late, arriving early. Anything to avoid thinking about how perfectly she had fit in his arms, how right it had felt. But then the nausea started. At first, she attributed it to stress, to the emotional turmoil of seeing Jackson every day and pretending her heart wasn't breaking. But when she realized her period was late, a cold dread settled in her stomach. The pregnancy test she took in the bathroom of a drugstore, 3 blocks from her apartment, showed positive. So did the next 3 she took. Emily sat on the closed toilet seat in her apartment, staring at the collection of positive tests, and felt her world tilt on its axis. She was pregnant with Jackson Pierce's baby, her boss's baby, a man who was engaged to another woman. Rachel found her there an hour later, still sitting in the same position. The tests lined up on the counter, like accusatory fingers. "Oh, honey," Rachel whispered, pulling Emily into her arms as the tears finally came. Emily told her everything then, the whole story spilling out between sobs. About the gala, about Jackson, about the engagement announcement, and now this impossible situation. "You have to tell him," Rachel said firmly. "He has a right to know." "He's engaged, Rachel. He's going to marry Diana Ashford in 6 months. What am I supposed to do? Ruin his carefully planned merger marriage with news that his assistant is pregnant? He should have thought about that before he slept with you. He didn't know it was me. But he knew afterward, and he didn't end the engagement. That tells you everything you need to know about his priorities." Rachel's voice was gentle but firm. "You need to protect yourself and this baby. Tell him, and then decide what you want to do based on his reaction." But before Emily could work up the courage to tell Jackson, Diana Ashford appeared at the office. She swept in like she owned the place, all designer clothes and practiced smiles, asking for Jackson with the entitlement of someone who knew she would never be refused. Emily felt physically ill as she announced Diana's arrival over the intercom. Diana waited in reception, and Emily couldn't help but study her from a distance. She was beautiful in a polished, perfect way, with blonde hair styled in an elegant twist and a diamond engagement ring that probably cost more than Emily would make in 5 years. She belonged in Jackson's world, in a way Emily never could. When Jackson emerged to greet Diana, Emily watched as the other woman kissed his cheek possessively, as she linked her arm through his and smiled up at him with practiced affection. Jackson's face remained neutral, but Emily noticed he didn't return the kiss, didn't pull Diana closer. Still, the message was clear. This was his future. A future that didn't include Emily. That night, Emily typed out her resignation letter. She couldn't stay here, couldn't watch Jackson move forward with his life, while she carried his child in secret. She would tell him about the baby, but first, she needed to secure her own future. She had enough savings to last a few months while she looked for a new job, and her mother in Pennsylvania had been begging her to come home for a visit. Maybe she could go there, have the baby away from the chaos of New York. Thomas Reed appeared at her desk the next morning before Jackson arrived. He was a handsome man in his early 30s with kind eyes and an easy smile, but today his expression was serious. "Emily, can we talk? Maybe grab coffee?" Surprised but curious, Emily agreed. At the small cafe across the street, Thomas stirred his coffee nervously before speaking. "I'm going to be direct because I think someone needs to be. You're in love with Jackson." Emily's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "I don't know what you mean. Please don't insult my intelligence. I've known Jackson since college. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. And I saw you at the gala, Emily. I saw you leave with a man in a black mask. And when I saw Jackson the next day, he looked like someone had torn his world apart and put it back together wrong. Thomas, I can't talk about this." He's miserable. "The engagement to Diana is a business arrangement pushed by his board and her father. Jackson built Pierce Industries from nothing, but when he took it public 2 years ago, He gave up some control. The board thinks this merger with Ashford Enterprises will secure their future. They've been pressuring him for months. That's not my problem, Emily said, but her voice cracked. Isn't it? Look, I don't know exactly what happened between you two, but I know Jackson. He's been following his sense of duty and responsibility his whole life. He's convinced himself he has to go through with this engagement because it's what's best for the company, for his employees. But I've never seen him happy, Emily. Not until you came along. He made his choice, did he? Or did he just take the path of least resistance because he's scared? Thomas leaned forward. Talk to him. Tell him how you feel. Give him a chance to choose differently. Some things are more complicated than feelings, Thomas. He has responsibilities, and I won't be the woman who ruins his life. What Emily didn't say was that she was protecting more than just herself now. She had a baby to think about, a child who deserved better than to be the secret shame of a billionaire's mistake. That afternoon, Emily placed her resignation letter on Jackson's desk while he was in a meeting. She didn't trust herself to hand it to him directly, to see his reaction. The letter was professional and brief, citing personal reasons for her departure and giving 2 weeks' notice. She was packing up her personal items. From her desk, when Jackson stormed out of his office, her letter clutched in his fist. His face was a mask of barely controlled emotion, his eyes blazing with something that looked like panic. My office. Now. Emily followed on shaking legs. The moment the door closed behind them, Jackson's careful control cracked. You can't leave. I can, and I am. You'll find another assistant easily enough. Someone more qualified. But I don't want another assistant. I want you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. You can't have me, Mr. Pierce. You're engaged to another woman. You made your choice. That's not fair. Jackson's voice was raw. You don't understand the pressure, the expectations. Then help me understand. Tell me why you're marrying Diana when you look at me the way you do. Tell me why you haven't told her about what happened between us. Emily's voice rose, despite her efforts to stay calm. Tell me why I should stay here and watch you build a life with someone else, when it's killing me inside. Jackson stared at her, his chest heaving. For a moment, Emily thought he might actually tell her the truth, might finally be honest about his feelings. But then, his expression shuttered closed, and he straightened his shoulders. You're right. It's not fair to you. I accept your resignation, Miss Morrison. You can leave at the end of the day. I'll have Susan send your final paycheck. The cold dismissal was worse than anything else he could have said. Emily nodded stiffly, fighting back tears. Fine. I'll clear out my desk. She turned to leave, but Jackson's voice stopped her. Emily, wait. She turned back, hope flaring treacherously in her chest. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. That night meant more to me than you'll ever know. But not enough, Emily whispered. It didn't mean enough. She walked out of his office with her head high, even as her heart lay in pieces on the floor behind her. She would tell him about the baby eventually, but not today. Today, she needed to focus on survival, on putting one foot in front of the other until she could breathe again without. Feeling like she was drowning, Emily spent the weekend in a fog of grief and indecision. Her resignation was official, her desk cleared, but she still hadn't told Jackson about the pregnancy. The secret felt like a weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Rachel had argued passionately that he deserved to know, that keeping this from him was wrong, but Emily couldn't shake the fear that telling him would make everything worse. Monday morning, she woke with renewed determination. She would go in for her final day, hand over her remaining projects to Susan, who would temporarily take over her duties, and tell Jackson about the baby. What he chose to do with that information would be up to him, but at least she would have done the right thing. The office felt strange now, like a place she had once belonged but no longer did. Susan greeted her with sympathy in her eyes. Word had clearly spread about Emily's sudden departure, though no one knew the real reason. Emily had just settled at her desk to begin sorting files when Jackson's office door opened. He looked terrible. His suit was as impeccable as always, but there were dark circles under his eyes and a haggardness to his face that suggested he hadn't slept. Their eyes met, and Emily saw raw pain there before he masked it behind his usual professional facade. "Miss Morrison, my office, please. We need to discuss the transition." Emily followed him in, her heart pounding. This was it. She would tell him now in private, before she left for good. But before she could speak, Jackson moved to stand behind his desk, putting the physical barrier between them. And his next words shattered what remained of her composure. "I want you to know that you're easily replaceable," he said, his voice cold and detached. "I've already interviewed 3 candidates who are more than qualified to take over your position. Susan can handle things until I make my selection." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. Replaceable. After everything they had shared, after the connection she had felt so deeply, she was just replaceable to him. The hurt transformed instantly into anger, a white-hot fury that burned through her grief. "You're right, Mr. Pierce," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "I am replaceable. So go ahead. Replace me. Find some other woman to fetch your coffee and manage your schedule and watch you marry a woman you don't love. Find someone who won't make the mistake of thinking you're actually human underneath that expensive suit." Jackson's eyes widened, but Emily wasn't finished. 3 months of suppressed emotion came pouring out in a torrent she couldn't control. "Find someone who won't be stupid enough to fall in love with you. Someone who won't give you the most precious thing she had to offer and then watch you throw it away like it meant nothing. Someone who won't break her own heart trying to be professional while dying inside every single day." "Emily," Jackson's voice was strangled, all his careful control evaporating. "No, you wanted me to leave, so I'm leaving. You wanted me to be replaceable, so I'll be replaced. I hope your business merger marriage makes you very happy. Mr. Pierce, I hope it's worth everything you're giving up." She turned toward the door, tears streaming down her face, no longer caring who saw them. "Stop." Jackson's command was sharp, desperate. Emily froze with her hand on the door handle. She heard him move, felt him approach, until he was right behind her, close enough that she could feel his body heat. "Don't go. Please don't go. Why shouldn't I? You just told me I'm replaceable, because I lied." His voice broke on the words. "You're not replaceable. You're irreplaceable. And I'm terrified." Emily turned slowly to find Jackson's face raw with emotion, all his masks finally stripped away. "Terrified of what?" "Of this. Of how much I feel for you. Of how completely you've destroyed every defense I've ever built." He reached out with a shaking hand to cup her face, his thumb wiping away her tears. "I've spent my entire life doing what was expected of me, what was responsible, what was best for business. And then you walked into my life and made me want to be selfish for the first time ever." "Jackson," Emily whispered, her anger melting in the face of his vulnerability. "That night at the gala, before I knew it was you, I felt something I'd never felt before, like I'd been searching for something my whole life and finally found it. And then, when I realized it was you, my assistant, the woman I'd been fighting my feelings for, I panicked. I have this engagement that's been in the works for months. Business deal that will secure the future of my company and protect hundreds of jobs. How could I choose my own happiness over all of that?" "So you chose the engagement," Emily said quietly. "God, I tried. I told myself it was the right thing to do, the responsible thing. But every day, watching you, wanting you, knowing what we could have together, it's been destroying me. And now you're leaving. And I realize that losing you is worse than any business deal falling through. Worse than disappointing my board. Worse than anything." Emily's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're not leaving here. Not today. Not ever, if I have anything to say about it." Jackson's hands framed her face with infinite tenderness. "I'm saying I'm ending the engagement with Diana. I'm saying that I don't care what my board thinks or what society expects or what anyone says about the CEO falling for his assistant. I only care about you. You can't just end an engagement. There will be consequences, then I'll deal with them. Thomas has been telling me for weeks that I'm an idiot, and he's right. I've been so focused on doing what's expected that I forgot to think about what I actually want. And what I want is you, Emily. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you. I want everything. The tears came harder now, but they were different tears. I'm pregnant, Emily blurted out, unable to hold the secret any longer. That night, we didn't use protection, and I'm pregnant with your baby. Jackson went completely still, his hands frozen on her face. Emily watched fear and hope and wonder chase across his features in rapid succession. You're pregnant? With my child? Yes, I found out 2 weeks ago. I was going to tell you, but then Diana showed up, and you seemed so committed to the engagement. And I thought it would be better to just disappear and raise the baby on my own rather than complicate your life. Jackson's laugh was half sob. Emily, you are my life. And now you're carrying our child? His hands moved from her face to her stomach, resting there with reverent wonder. Our baby? Yes, marry me. Emily blinked, certain she had misheard. What, marry me? Not because you're pregnant, although that makes me happier than I can express. Marry me because I love you. Because I've been in love with you since the moment you walked into this office 3 months ago. Because that night at the gala wasn't an accident or a mistake. It was fate finally getting us to the place we were always supposed to be. You love me? Emily could barely process the words. Desperately, completely, utterly. Jackson kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. I know I've handled this badly. I know I hurt you, and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that if you'll let me. But please, Emily, don't leave. Don't take yourself and our baby out of my life. Let me prove that I choose you, that I'll always choose you. Emily wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to throw herself into his arms and never let go. But she had to be smart, had to protect herself and the baby. What about Diana? What about the business deal? I'll call her father today. The engagement was never about love, and Diana knows that. It was a business arrangement, and yes, ending it will have consequences. Richard Ashford won't be happy, and my board will probably try to fight me on it. But I don't care. I'll find other investors, other partnerships. There are always solutions in business. But you, Emily, you're irreplaceable. The word hung between them, transforming from the weapon he had tried to use to push her away into a declaration of love. You really mean that? I've never meant anything more. Jackson pulled her closer, one hand still resting protectively on her stomach. I was a coward before, choosing the safe path instead of the right one. But I'm choosing differently now. I'm choosing us. Our family. Our future. If you'll have me. Emily looked into his eyes and saw everything she had been dreaming of for months. Not just desire, though that was there too, but love and commitment and a promise of partnership. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Jackson's kiss was fierce and claiming, pouring months of suppressed emotion into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to do this right. I'm going to court you properly, take you on dates, meet your mother, prove to everyone that this isn't some scandal or mistake. You're the woman I love, and I'm going to make sure the whole world knows it. My mother is going to be shocked. She always said I was too picky, that I'd never find someone good enough. I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of you. Jackson's hand splayed across her still flat stomach. Of both of you. The next few weeks were chaotic. Jackson ended his engagement to Diana Ashford in person, offering a generous settlement to smooth things over with her father. As predicted, Richard Ashford was furious. The business community buzzed with speculation about what had caused the sudden split. Jackson's board called an emergency meeting, concerned about the implications for their planned merger, but Jackson stood firm. He held a press conference where he announced that while the engagement to Diana Ashford had ended amicably, he was entering into a different kind of partnership. He took Emily's hand in front of the cameras and declared his intention to marry her, his voice strong and unwavering despite the shock on many faces in the room. The media had a field day. Billionaire CEO marries his secretary screamed the headlines, some painting it as a scandal, others as a romance for the ages. Emily endured the scrutiny with grace, holding her head high, even when society columnists questioned whether she was a gold digger or when Jackson's competitors tried to use the situation against him. But through it all, Jackson never wavered. He supported her publicly and privately, protecting her from the worst of the media attention, while also showing the world that he was proud to have her by his side. He negotiated new business deals to replace the fallen Ashford merger, proving to his board that his personal life didn't have to compromise his business acumen. Thomas was Jackson's best man at the small, private wedding they held 2 months later. Rachel stood as Emily's maid of honor, crying happy tears through the entire ceremony. Margaret Morrison sat in the front row, beaming with pride at her daughter marrying for love rather than convenience. 6 months after that beautiful autumn wedding, Emily went into labor. Jackson stayed by her side through every contraction, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. When their daughter finally arrived, tiny and perfect with a shock of dark hair, Jackson cried openly as he held her for the first time. "She's perfect," he whispered, looking from the baby to Emily with wonder in his eyes. "You're both perfect." Emily watched her husband cradle their daughter with infinite tenderness, marveling at how far they had come from that night at the masquerade ball. They had taken the hardest path, choosing love over convenience, but it had been worth every difficult moment. Jackson asked, unable to take his eyes off his daughter's tiny face. "I was thinking Grace," Emily said softly, "because it was Grace that brought us together, even when we tried to stay apart. Grace Morrison Pierce." Jackson tested the name, then smiled. "It's perfect. She's perfect. And you, Mrs. Pierce, are the most incredible woman I've ever known. I love you," Emily said simply.
Oh.
"I love you both. More than I ever thought possible." Jackson leaned down to kiss Emily softly, carefully, mindful of what her body had just been through. "Thank you for not leaving. Thank you for giving me a chance to choose right. Thank you for realizing I'm irreplaceable," Emily teased gently. "Always. You and Grace, you're my whole world now." He settled into the chair beside her hospital bed, still holding their daughter. And Emily knew that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because it had been easy, but because they had fought for it. Had chosen each other when it would have been simpler to walk away. Years later, when people asked them about their love story, Jackson always said the same thing. "She saved herself for the man who would steal her heart. I was terrified I'd already lost mine before I found her." But love has a way of making itself known, even when we try to hide behind masks. Literal or figurative. The best decision I ever made was admitting that some things are more important than business. That some people are truly irreplaceable. And that the bravest thing a man can do is choose love, even when it's complicated. And Emily, watching their daughter grow into a bright, curious child who had her father's determination and her mother's gentle heart, knew that saving herself had been worth it. Not because it led to wealth or status, but because it led to this genuine, hard-won, beautiful love that had transformed both their lives completely. In the end, the story that began with masks and secrets became one of transparency and devotion, proving that sometimes the most unexpected love stories are the ones worth fighting for.